My name's Abigail, and you're listening to Absolutely Me. Well, hello and happy Friday to all of you listening to this on a Friday. I suppose it could be another day that you're listening to this, but this episode will come out on a Friday. So happy Friday if you're listening to it the day it comes out. If not, happy whatever day it is you're listening to this. Oh, my brain, you guys. I am... First of all, just going to kind of put a caveat to this episode. I'm going to try and not get on a soapbox here in this episode, but I'm feeling a lot of feelings, and one of my resolutions, not resolutions, because I talked last week about how I hate the idea of resolutions, but one of the things I'm trying to incorporate into my life is not caring so much what other people think. And just talking about things and like being honest and not caring so much. And especially on this podcast, I just really don't want to hold myself back. And I have a lot of feelings about this week, about this topic. And something that's really ironic is I was going to talk about this and the idea of femininity. This is something I've been like planning for a few weeks and like been writing notes about for a few weeks. And then the Golden Globes happened, and I'm sure a lot of you saw things on social media if you didn't see the actual Golden Globes, and there were just a lot of rage that has been built up inside of me and is now ready to be released. So I have no idea how long this episode is going to be. It could be short, it could be long. I've got quite a few notes that I'm wanting to, things I wanted to talk about. And so just putting a caveat out there, this may be one of my more ragey episodes. So just be prepared. It's going to be a good conversation, and I'm going to say a lot of things. I have a lot of thoughts, and I really hope that you do listen and kind of take in what I'm saying, because I do feel like this is a really important topic, and I really want to be able to connect with people on this. And maybe for, men listening to this, especially, to have a appreciation for the women in their life and some of the struggles that women go through, and just thinking about maybe femininity. And I'm going to have a hard time saying that word. I already know. So I'm going to try and avoid saying it. But femininity in a different light. In a different way. So really the main things I had planned about talking about in this episode were about being in my feminine era. And that was kind of the direction that I was originally going to take with this episode. And just talking about how, growing up, I wouldn't say I was a tomboy growing up, but I definitely did not care so much about, trends. Like I wasn't one of those like Hollister, Abercrombie kids. Like I really didn't care about any of that kind of stuff. And like girly things in my head, those kind of things were not on my mind, and I didn't necessarily have anything wrong with them. It just wasn't ever anything that I like aspired to be or have. And maybe I was different than what I'm recalling, but just as I look back on my life, like these are the things I don't really remember experiencing or really focusing on in my life. And I especially formed like some super hyper individuality and some super hyper like independence. And I really used to think that I didn't need anybody to take care of me, and I didn't want to rely on anyone other than myself to care for me. And, these are things I'm working on in therapy. We can unwrap this whole topic in another episode, just this whole thing of hyper independence and how that came to be in another episode. But just for some context, I felt very much that way, and I was very much in my taking care of myself, independent, if you want to classify it, and this is, how people are saying it, like in my masculine energy. And I really had to be in that for a really long time. And I was very much kind of forced to be. I had to really learn how to take care of myself and just really like provide for myself emotionally, physically, temporally, spiritually, like all these things. And I was like, you know what? I don't need anybody else. I can do this all on my own. I don't need anybody to take care of me. I don't need anybody to protect me. Like I can protect myself. And I have had for a really, really long time these really big walls up, and even in dating and everything. And I just had these big walls up, and I was very reserved and just very like independent, and probably didn't put forth very good energy like into the world as far as like wanting to make connection and like be vulnerable and like let somebody else in and kind of put those walls down. I definitely wasn't doing that, and I was really in dating, I was dating a lot of people who I just looked at as kind of like projects, and was very much like, oh, I need to like take care of other people. Like I need to be this protector. I need to like fix everyone. And very much in my like have it all together phase, even though I absolutely did not have anything together in my life. And especially like in my abusive marriage, was very, very guarded, and was also being forced to become more reliant on my abuser, on my ex-husband. And it was a weird power dynamic of me having to be so hyper independent still, but also be like under the control of this person. And it was really weird. And then getting out of that, I found myself just really lost. And I've always been kind of like, and I don't even know the best way to put this, guys, because those of you who know me will probably know like what I'm talking about, but those of you who don't know me don't have any idea how I was or how I am, or and so it's really difficult to put these things into words. But just know I was very guarded. I was not going to be invulnerable. I was really afraid of like letting other people take care of me and letting other people in. And I always just kind of wanted to be like the low maintenance girl, and like be kind of not like a pick me girl. I don't know that I would go as far as to say I was ever like a pick me girl. I don't think I was. I think I was too self-aware for that. But that I did kind of want to be like the cool girl, and like the one that was like low maintenance and could just like vibe with everybody, and that I wouldn't like get in anybody's way, like girls or boys. And I didn't really want to make like a big deal of my presence either. Like I didn't really want to take up space in the world for a really long time. And I didn't care about so much finding my own look, or getting my hair really done really nice, or like getting my nails done, or like taking care of myself. Like all of these things, I just think I viewed it as taking up space that I didn't need to be taking up, and I really didn't want to do that for a lot of reasons. And so I, for a long time, didn't participate in a lot of the quote unquote girly things of like getting nice haircuts, or wearing like investing in nice clothes, and like trying to figure out my style, and like putting on makeup every day and like, and I went through phases of this, but now I feel like I'm in the point in my life where I'm in my soft girl era, and I'm really just trying to live my life in a way that is embodying who I want to be and how I want to engage with the world. And that is just, I'm trying to be more in my feminine era. This is a long circle to come back to this. And a lot of this, to be honest, you guys, has to do with the person I'm dating. Me being really comfortable with like not having my shit together all the time, and knowing that he can step up as an equal partner to me and really just like take care of me when I need it. And he has really done a good job of that. And you know, when I've had some emotional breakdowns and some, you know, really just rough times, I've been able to like be really vulnerable with him, and he's really been able to pick me up and help me out. And therapy's been really good, and just deciding that, you know, I am okay with embracing my feminine side, and that it's okay to be like feminine and girly and all of these things, and that doesn't diminish any sort of power that you have. And this last summer, the summer of girlhood, really just solidified this in my brain for me, that, you know, you can be quote unquote girly and feminine, but that doesn't mean you're any less powerful. And, you know, we had the summer of the Taylor Swift The Eras tour and Beyonce and her Renaissance tour. We had the summer of the Barbie movie, and just all of these things that were coming out that we were experiencing, that really, it felt like all of these women were coming together to celebrate girlhood, and that it was okay not only just to like be girly, but that it made us powerful, and that like really leaning into our feminine energy and just like these quote unquote girly things was good, and it was healthy, and like it was empowering. And I hate using that word empowering sometimes, but it really was. Like this last summer was really, I think, empowering for a lot of women, and it was so incredible to see all of these things on the media, on the stage, on the big screen, at the movies, you know, that were really embodying the life of a woman and the experiences that we go through and what it means to be a woman. And that's one thing that I really have loved about like Taylor Swift is I'm a huge Swiftie. For people who don't know, I'm not like the Swiftiest of the Swifties. Like, I'm not like cultishly Swiftie like a lot of people that I know, but I am a Swiftie. I've been listening to Taylor Swift for a long time. She was, you know, my artist of the decade. She's been my artist of the year every single year. I listen to her at least once a day. I went to the Eras tour this last year. I'm going again this year in November with my mom and my sister and my best friend. We're gonna go to Canada and see her in November. And like, I'm a big Taylor Swift fan. Okay, I've listened to her music for a really long time. I like really resonate with a lot of the music. It makes me really emotional, to be honest. Her music, there's a lot of things that make me feel really emotional. And I think a big part of why Taylor Swift resonates so well with people is because she can tap into what it's like to be a woman. And, you know, a lot of people write off a lot of the things that Taylor Swift do as like silly or stupid, or just like focusing on her relationships with guys. And to people who say that, I just get so frustrated, because I'm like, you obviously have not ever, first of all, listened to Taylor Swift, or other than like her pop hits that are like on the radio. You've never like listened. You don't know the story of Taylor Swift. And I get this way about a lot of things, where people just have these like preconceived notions or judgments about anything. And I'm like, you literally are just basing this opinion off of like 3 Instagram videos or YouTube videos that you've seen about this topic. Like, you don't you don't know. Like, just shut up and sit down and just like listen to people who actually know what they're talking about in these kind of areas. This is where I'm going to get up more on my soapbox, you guys, and I acknowledge this, okay? Just know I'm self-aware enough to realize what I'm doing, but it just, it drives me crazy when people make comments about like how dumb it is to like Taylor Swift, or how stupid it is to, you know, like Beyonce. And like the summer of Taylor Swift was also the summer of Beyonce, and she was going out and she was doing her Renaissance tour, and you know, it was amazing to see Taylor Swift and Beyonce come together in the last few months and like really celebrate each other and support each other at their like the Taylor Swift Eras movie and the Renaissance movie. It was like so cool to see them come together and be like, you know what, like you can't just try and pit us together. Like, we're gonna support each other, and we're women and we're friends, and like one of us being successful doesn't take away from the other, and they just lift each other up. And I just loved that. And then we had the Barbie movie, which again really just talked about the experience of being a woman and the just constant pressures that are put on us as women, and really like broke down the patriarchy in such a easy, digestible way to understand, and so good and so satirical. And it was just, the movie was so good. And then you have the Golden Globes, and you get whatever his name is, Joe Coy or whatever, the comedian, who gets up and talks about how, you know, Oppenheimer was this amazing movie based off this book and like this real life whatever, and that Barbie was about a doll with big boobies. And you're just like, it just, you guys, it made me so mad and so frustrated that it was just like the whole, it felt like movement and progression and just the advancements that women have made this last year. It felt like it just got all completely swept under the rug. And I know people have seen the clips of everybody in the audience and like the women. And then, you know, he later goes on to make a joke about Taylor Swift in the NFL. And Taylor Swift just like takes a sip of her drink. And people are calling her so dramatic. But earlier when they made the comment about Barbie, Ryan Gosling sitting there, and you can clearly see in the footage that he's like glaring and is like super not like vibing with what they're talking about. People are like, oh, Taylor Swift overreacted so much, like, because she took her drink. And in an interview that Taylor Swift did like years ago, she talks about how, you know, men can react, but women can only ever overreact. And it's just the perfect example of this double standard. And it doesn't make sense to me how people can't see things like that and just not understand how messed up this system is and how messed up the treatment of women is. And just that all of these experiences were just completely swept under the rug. It felt like, and people are like really upset. Women are really upset, and people don't really understand why. And I think it's just they don't understand how you just could completely miss the point of the whole movie. It was like, Oppenheimer was great and it was fine, but it wasn't that profound, and it was fine. It was a movie about a narcissistic man, whatever. And like, we have 17,000 of those. And like Barbie just like was transformative, and anybody who says otherwise completely missed the whole point of the whole movie. And it just it once again brought me back to some of the issues that are around femininity. I told you guys I was going to have a hard time saying this word. Femininity and girlhood and womanhood, and just that society treats these girly things as so dumb sometimes, and like I feel sometimes, even like talking to any guys in my life, if I'm talking about Taylor Swift, or if I'm talking about, getting my nails done, or talking about like doing self-care, or taking an everything shower, or whatever it is, just embracing my femininity and doing these things, it's like, oh, okay, and it's like not taken very seriously, and it's kind of just like looked down on. And like I don't know why that is. Like, why does the world, or the patriarchy, or men often look down on things that women enjoy and classify them as stupid, and like makes us less powerful? Like, what's the difference between liking Taylor Swift or getting my nails done? What's the difference between that than spending 8 hours golfing, or watching Andrew Tate videos, or being like emotionally controlled by a sports team winning or losing? Like, why is me caring about Taylor Swift stupid, but like a man being emotionally controlled by whether a sports team win or lose is not irrational? It just doesn't, these things, it just doesn't make sense to me. And it's so hard to continue to go forward in the world and like try and have people understand, men especially. It's so hard sometimes to talk about what it is like being a woman, because it just seems like men don't understand like what we go through, and being a woman is so hard, you guys. And I just, as a no, I'm not discounting men's struggles. I know men go through a lot. I know men have a lot of mental health issues, and I'm not discounting that. Like, I'm not discounting the struggles that they go through, but I do think women are taught to be empathetic of men and can kind of put themselves in their shoes and see the world through their perspective, and men just are not taught how to do that. And men just, it seems like men just aren't as willing to do that, and don't put in the work, and aren't taught how to do that. And it's not like societally taught how to do that either. Whereas, since we live in a patriarchal system, women are constantly having to put themselves in the shoes of men and think about what it's like to live as a man, and have to kind of put themselves into more of a masculine space just to move through the world and to be able to be successful or to be taken seriously. But men are not taught how to do that with women. And it's very frustrating. And it's really hard, honestly, as a woman, to talk about issues with men. And I remember when Roe v. Wade got overturned, I was at work, and I was working in a warehouse at the time, and I was the only woman that worked in the warehouse, and I was super, super emotional, and just was so upset by this, like the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And my coworkers just didn't understand. They couldn't understand why I was feeling emotional, and why I was feeling so hurt and so betrayed and like genuinely upset by these things. It just, they couldn't put themselves in my shoes and have like a conversation with me about it. And it was really difficult to connect with them about these things that I was upset about, because they couldn't be empathetic towards my situation, or my thoughts, or my feelings, or my experiences. And that's what's hard, I think, is that women so often will cater to the emotions of men. They will put themselves in men's shoes. Like, they'll do whatever they can do to like make men comfortable, and they'll really like focus on making sure that we can do everything we can to live in a men's world. But as soon as women start like tapping into these more like feminine or girly things, it's looked upon as like stupid and like less than. It's like, oh, well, you're not like aspiring to like live, like have these like masculine qualities, or like these masculine energies. But then when women do embody that, then men are like, oh, well, I don't want a woman who is like gonna be, bringing home the bacon and like being independent. Like, I want a woman that, like, caters to me. And I'm not saying this is all men, and this is very broad, and, I'm very lucky. A lot of the men that I surround myself in my life do not feel this way. This is just like a societal, these are just the thoughts I'm having about society and what is frustrating me about that. And so it just feels like women have to cater so much to men, and that there's so much, everything we do is like to please men and to like have the male gaze look at us and like be pleasing to the male gaze. And I'm just so over that at this point, you guys. Like, I'm just so over it. I'm so over all of this. And I'm just, being a woman is so hard. We have constant beauty standards that we are having to live up to, and being compared to other women, and women in media are being constantly bombarded about their bodies, and there's just this sense of lost identity now with women, and like trying to regain that back. And that's what was so exciting about the Barbie movie and about the summer of women and about Taylor Swift and Beyonce. It's just like kind of reclaiming that girlhood and like coming together and like celebrating that. And it's hard when you have those experiences and they're like being torn down and being told that they're less than, and it's like, okay, well, if I can't like celebrate this part of myself, then like what can I celebrate? And it really creates this like cognitive dissonance within yourself of like, okay, well, if I can't really celebrate these things about being a woman, and I like don't really want to like put myself into this like hyper independent masculine space because it's whatever turns off these guys, then it's like, okay, well, how do I act and how do I move through the world? And it really it makes it hard to find your identity and really like decide how you want to move through the world. And it's hard to shed off that cloak of trying to appeal to other people and just really learning how to appeal to yourself and create that identity that you really want for yourself. Women are treated so terribly by men in the world, just they really are. And it's also difficult to discuss this with men because they're not experiencing it themselves. And it just, again, another example, when I was working in the warehouse, and I would be driving the forklift around, and I was a really good forklift driver, you guys, okay? I was pretty good, and I've driven a forklift at a few different jobs, and I've always been pretty good at it. I wasn't like the best of the best of the best, but, I could get it done, and I knew what I was doing, and I would be driving this forklift through the warehouse, and it would always be, some people who didn't work with me that were just like walking through the warehouse with some other employees. They'd see me on the forklift and they'd make jokes about like, oh, better watch out, like she's coming through, or like, oh wow, you're doing so good, sweetheart, or like, oh my gosh, like try not to run into me. All these jokes all the time, and it was infuriating, honestly. So we have these double standards that are placed on us, and it just is infuriating. And again, referencing what I talked about earlier with Taylor Swift and Ryan Gosling at the Golden Globes, and just like the differences in commenting on their reactions, just it's outrageous. And there's so many double standards, and I could rage on and on and on and on again about all of these things, and I'm trying not to just like shove these things down your throats, but I'm really just trying to express this rage that's within me and talk about these things. And hopefully, this isn't the first time you're hearing these thoughts, but if it is the first time, hopefully it can kind of open up your mind to some of the experiences that women go through. And I was told over and over again in my relationship with my ex-husband that the only thing women are good for is obeying their husbands and having kids. And that's something that I feel like people, it's just as ingrained in just a lot of society, and a lot of men have this attitude towards women now, and it's very frustrating. And I want you to remember that, women are definitely meant for more than that, and that this treatment is it's not uncommon, and that this attitude is not uncommon. And if you really, I would hope that everybody listening would examine within themselves these kind of biases that they may have, or these feelings that they may have, and just really try and understand where women are coming from, what the experiences of women are like, and just really try and put yourselves in the shoes of the women around you, and learn about these things, and really learn about the plights of women. To be honest, like, just put yourselves in our shoes for just a minute, and other women, like, put yourselves in the shoes of other women, and just come together with camaraderie and support of each other. And just to close out, this is going to be kind of a shorter podcast, but that's okay, because it's kind of intense. I just wanted to go through and talk about some women's history moments, and just kind of give you an overview of women's history in the United States, and hopefully this kind of puts some other things into perspective. So in 1833 was when Oberlin College was founded, and Oberlin College was the first co-educational institution that accepted women and African Americans into this school. In 1848, Seneca Falls Convention happens. 300 women and men signed the Declaration of Sentiments, which was just a plea for the end of discrimination against women. And also in 1848, New York passed the Married Women's Property Act, and for the first time, a woman isn't this is crazy. This is the first time a woman isn't automatically liable for her husband's debts, and she could never, women could never enter contracts of their own, and then women could collect rent or receive an inheritance in her own right, and she could file a lawsuit based on her own behalf. And this happened in 1848. Okay, so crazy. In 1870, the 15th Amendment is ratified, and the 15th Amendment said, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude." So this made it so that African Americans could vote, but women still couldn't vote. In 1872, there was a woman named Victoria Woodhull, and she became the first woman to run for U.S. president, and she doesn't receive very many votes. This is in 1872, so not surprising. In 1890, Wyoming was the first state to grant women the right to vote in its state elections, which is pretty progressive of Wyoming. In 1900, everybody kind of passed a similar bill to the bill I talked about earlier that made it so, women could have ownership over their own property and their earnings, and that they weren't automatically tied to their husband's debt. So this is 1900, okay? In 1918, a woman named Margaret Sanger wins her suit in New York to allow doctors to advise their married patients about birth control for health purposes. Okay, so this is in 1918. For health purposes, women can start using birth control. Then in 1920, so this is 100 years ago, the 19th Amendment is ratified, which grants women the right to vote. And it says that the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by the state on account of sex. Okay, so 1920, women can vote. 1922, the first U.S. woman senator is elected. Her name was Rebecca Felton. She was 87. She was a suffragette, which, she helped get women the right to vote. And she serves only for 2 days, which is crazy. In 1923, the National Women's Party proposes a constitutional amendment that says that men and women shall have equal rights to the United States and every place subject to its jurisdiction, and that Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So this is in 1923. They're promoting women's equality. This doesn't pass, unsurprisingly. In 1932, a lady named Hattie Wyatt Caraway from Arkansas becomes the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate. And so this is about 150 years after the creation of the United States. In 1933, the first woman to serve on a presidential serve on a presidential cabinet under FDR was Labor Secretary Frances Perkins. So that's in 1933. And in 1934 was the first American woman to serve as a director of a major corporation. This lady was named Letty Pate Whitehead, and she becomes the director of the Coca-Cola Company. So in 1934, this is the first time that a woman has served as a director of a major corporation. In 1936, judicial approval of medicinal use of birth control is established. Remember, this is just medicinal for birth control in 1936. In 1937, the U.S. Supreme Court upholds Washington State's minimum wage laws for women. So they finally had a minimum wage for women in 1937. In 1963, so we're jumping about 30 years after this, the Equity Pay Act is passed, which promises equitable wages for the same work regardless of race, color, religion, national origin, or sex of the worker. Okay, so this is in the 60s. Then in 64 is when the Civil Rights Act passed. And in 1965, it's a court case. It's Griswold versus Connecticut. The Supreme Court overturns one of the last state laws prohibiting the prescription or use of contraceptives by married couples. So it wasn't until 1965 that everywhere in the U.S., married couples could use birth control. Okay, 1965, women didn't have a choice if whether they wanted to get pregnant or not. If they were married, they could not use birth control until 1965. In 1972, Title IX passes, which prohibits sex discrimination in all aspects of education programs, and that receives federal support. So in 1971, also in the 70s, there was quite a few things that happened in the 70s, but in the 70s, the Supreme Court outlaws private employers refusing to hire women with preschool children. Until 1971, employers could deny women employment if they had preschool children. So kids before like kindergarten. Also in the 70s, the Supreme Court ruled that the right to privacy encompasses an unmarried person's right to use contraceptives. So that in 1970s, you couldn't ask people if they were using contraceptives if they were married. Also in the 70s, 73 is when Roe v. Wade was made legal, and that stated that the Constitution protected women's right to terminate an early pregnancy, making abortion legal in the U.S. And as we all know, it's since been overturned. In 1974, housing discrimination on the basis of sex against women are outlawed. So you could be denied housing if you were a woman until the 70s. In 74, it made it illegal to force pregnant women to take maternity leave on the assumption that they are incapable of working in their physical condition. In 1974, the Women's Educational Equity Act funds the development of non-sexist teaching materials and model programs that encourage full educational opportunities for women and girls. Also in 74, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act passes, and it does away with the practice of banks requiring single, widowed, or divorced women to bring a man along to co-sign any credit application. So until the 70s, women could be denied credit cards or like any credit in their name. They could be denied housing. They could be denied jobs. They could be denied using birth control as a married person, and they could be denied being able to work while they were pregnant. And also, they were denied being able to be on a jury because they were a woman. This was overturned. And there was discrimination, an anti-discrimination law that bans discrimination against women if they're pregnant. And in 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor is appointed as the first female U.S. Supreme Court justice. Okay, this is just until the 80s, you guys. My parents were already born at this point when this happened, which is crazy. In 1984, sex discrimination in organizational membership policies is forbidden, opening many previously all-male organizations to women. So like the Lions Club or the Rotary or those kind of things. Until 1984, women couldn't participate in that. And in 1987, Congress designates March as Women's History Month. So then we kind of jump forward. There's a lot of things that happened in the 70s. But in 1994 is when the Violence Against Women Act fund, or the Violence Against Women Act comes into effect, and it serves for victims of rape and domestic violence, allowing women to seek civil rights remedies for gender-related crimes, providing training to increase police and court official sensitivity, and a national 24-hour hotline for battered women. So in 1994 is when marital rape was made illegal in the United States. All right. In 1996, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg writes a landmark decision in the United States versus Virginia, which held that the state-supported Virginia Military Institute could not refuse to admit women. In 1997, Madeleine Albright is the first Secretary of State, and in 2007, Nancy Pelosi becomes the first female Speaker of the House. In 2009, Sonia Sotomayor is the first Hispanic American and the third woman to serve as a U.S. Supreme Court Justice. So in 2009, we've had 3 women who had served on the Supreme Court after almost 200 years of, or like 150 years of our country being around. It's fine. And then in 2013, this one is crazy, that the ban against women in military combat positions is removed. So in 2013, women were denied working in combat roles until 2013. Then they could. Also in 2013, there was a reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, and the bill extended coverage to women of Native American tribal lands who were attacked by non-tribal residents, as well as lesbians and immigrants. In 2016, Hillary Clinton was the first woman to secure the presidential nomination, becoming the first U.S. woman to lead the ticket of a majority party. We know she lost. And then in 2017, a worldwide protest called the Women's March happens the day following Donald Trump's presidential inauguration. It was the largest single-day protest in U.S. history, with an estimated 4 million participating in local marches across the nation. The organizers' goal for the march was to send a bold message to our new administration that their first day in office and to the world that women's rights are human rights, which is pretty cool. I was on a mission at this time, so I didn't know that protest had happened, and so that was cool to learn about. And then in 2020, Kamala Harris is sworn in as the first woman and first woman of color vice president in the United States. And then obviously we know 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned. So I know that was kind of like a long, like little history lesson, but hopefully it shows you like these landmark decisions that happen. Like a lot of these big decisions have really only happened within the last like 50 years of women really being free, more so to not have all this discrimination against them. Hopefully this podcast has been a little bit educational and it hasn't been too soapboxy. I appreciate you guys listening. I just hope you can put yourselves in the shoes of women and really can embrace femininity if you feel like you're in that space, and realize that these feminine and girly things are not dumb, and that women have been fighting for hundreds of years now at this point to come to the point that we're at. And it's very frustrating when we still have these misogynistic idiot assholes like Joe Coy making jokes about how Barbie is just a movie about a doll with big boobies. So I hope you take these things into consideration. I hope you guys have an amazing weekend. I hope you have an amazing, whatever day you're listening to this, hopefully Friday. And I will see you all next week. Love you. Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of Absolutely Me. Thank you to everyone who helped make this possible. Shout out to Tanner Johnson for the amazing intro. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, tell all your friends. And we'll be back next Friday with another episode. Love you. Bye.